India hosts the Obamas. A grand display of military hardware, marching bands, and even camels greet the president and first lady. Bracing for a blizzard, several feet of blowing snow in the Northeast could choke highways and cancel thousands of flights. Calling all lawyers. Legal volunteers needed to represent thousands of young people who fled Central America. And path to sainthood. We learn more about a priest from Washington, D.C. who's a step closer to being named a saint. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Monday, January 26th, 2015. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. A three-day presidential visit to India aims to strengthen America's alliance with the world's largest democracy. Our chief White House correspondent Susanne LaFrankie has more.
This meeting is mutually beneficial to both the United States and India. It will help both nations with their economies, militaries, and environments, and also help keep China at bay. A less publicized part of the meeting also includes India's government becoming more committed to religious freedom.
Mr. Obama is the first American president to be a guest at India's Grand Republic Day celebrations. It's his second visit to the country, a sign of the strengthening ties between the U.S. and the world's largest democracy. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Obama watched the military displays, musicians and decorated camels from inside a protective glass enclosure.
To the great partnership between our nations.
The strategic partnership includes a 10-year plan for defense ties, economic incentives, and renewable energy.
We are both warily watching China's rise, and there are economic opportunities for the U.S. in India.
Lisa Curtis, an expert on Asian studies, says India's booming economy and growing military could be the perfect foil to communist China.
We need to be incentivizing trade and investment, not stifling it.
The visit also produced an agreement allowing for more U.S. investments in nuclear energy development in India.
Economic opportunities.
Modi, a Hindu pro-business nationalist, was banned from the U.S. for years over his inaction during riots that led to the massacre of over 1,000 Muslims while he was governor in western India. Curtis says although the focus is on the economy and defense, the U.S. is keeping an eye on religious freedom for Muslims and Christians.
If the Modi government was to pursue steps that could infringe on the rights of the religious minorities in India, that would in turn impact the quality of the India-U.S. relationship.
Tomorrow, the president will travel to Saudi Arabia to pay respects to the family of the late King Abdullah, who died last week. Mr. Obama will meet with the newly appointed King Salman, an important meeting given all the ongoing tensions in the region. Brian?
Susanne LaFrankie at the White House. And Saudi Arabia's new king takes the throne at a time of great turmoil in that region. Catherine Elliott looks at what's ahead for the monarch.
Condolences and respect for the new king. But never in the Desert Kingdom's modern history has a new monarch inherited so much regional turmoil. To the south, Yemen, the government collapsing, rebels running the capital. To the north, Iraq, attacks on the border by radical Islamist ISIS and growing government tensions. And then there's oil, in King Salman's hands, the power to shape the global economy. In U.S.-Saudi relations, nuclear negotiations with Iran are poised to raise tensions. And the country still has a bad taste from the U.S. response to the Arab Spring in 2011. Saudis were urging Egyptian President Mubarak to stay, as the U.S. turned its back on the leader. As for the fight against ISIS, in the past year, King Abdullah positioned Saudi as the regional lead. For King Salman, continuity is expected to be his guiding principle. But he inherits a far more complicated kingdom than his predecessor. Catherine Elliott, EWTN News Nightly.
Jocelyn Cesari directs the Islam in the World Politics program at Georgetown's Berkeley Center. Sunni Saudi Arabia is a neighbor to Yemen and now taken over by Shia minority. Tell us the tensions between the Sunnis and the Shiites.
The Sunni and Shia tension is all over the region and is triggered by the competition between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Iran is Shia, Saudi Arabia is Sunni and considered itself the leader of the Sunni world. So Saudis do not want a Shia power in the region. So any attempt or situation where Shia are at stake, like the Houthi right now in Yemen, like Shia in Iraq, like the situation in Syria, Saudis become very nervous because these are places where Iran can play a role.
What is it like for Muslims in Saudi Arabia, and for that matter, for Christians?
There is no room for Christians. There is no room for Shia. Saudi regime defends a very particular interpretation of Islam that doesn't make any room for other religious voices of any kind.
Is that an authentic understanding of Islam, or is that their own brand?
It's their own brand of Islam. It's a modern interpretation going back to the 19th century. And it is a very intolerant, exclusivist approach to Islam. But you're absolutely right. They present themselves as the authentic, the true Islam all over the world.
You say there is no room for Christianity. Is it true that Catholics cannot worship in open? I mean,
nobody
there's no
can.
freedom.
No freedom at all. You are not allowed to express your religious belief if you don't believe or bind by the dominant creed of Islam protected by the king.
This is so different from what we believe as Americans, yet Saudi Arabia has been a powerful economic ally. What about the human rights abuses? Have they been overlooked?
They have been overlooked. Lots of transnational, international human rights groups, women's rights have been very vocal internationally, but it doesn't go very far because indeed Saudi Arabia has a very specific location that trigger and create the solidarity with the West in this region. So.
Oil, of course, speaks very loudly.
Yes.
From Cambridge University Press, your book is called The Awakening of the Muslim Democracy. Jocelyn Cesare, we appreciate you being with us. And
thank you.
Thanks for the insight you were able to add
you.
for us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Now some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. This winter hasn't been too tough on the Northeast, until now that is. The National Weather Service is tracking a powerful storm moving into the region. People up and down the East Coast are preparing for a storm that's being called potentially historic. 2 to 3 feet of snow could hit from northern New Jersey to southern Maine. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says major roadways, including the New York State Thruway and the Long Island Expressway, could be shut down. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio is urging people to return home as early as possible.
The early projections for this storm are that it would easily be as much as 2 feet of snow, potentially pushing on closer to 3 feet of snow.
Forecasters say the massive storm will bring a dangerous mix of heavy snow, powerful winds with gusts of up to 65 miles an hour, and widespread coastal flooding. Philadelphia could get a foot of snow. Pennsylvania's governor told residents, don't drive unless you absolutely must, and be careful.
If you're out there and you don't have to drive, obviously the best thing would be to stay off the roads.
Things look even tougher in New England, with Boston expecting 18 to 24 inches of snow. Stores have been busy with people buying essential items.
We are preparing to not leave the house for a few days should the need arise. Stocking up for this blizzard apocalypse that's about to happen.
Air travel is one of the big worries. Airlines are preparing to shut down operations along the East Coast, possibly canceling up to 1,700 scheduled flights. And a man takes responsibility for a small drone that crashed into the White House complex today. He says he didn't mean to do it, but he is likely to face many questions from the Secret Service. The crash prompted an immediate lockdown of the White House grounds. The lockdown lasted until it was determined there was no security threat. The Secret Service says the device was a 2-foot-long quadcopter. These small unmanned aircraft are sophisticated toys that can be used commercially. The President and First Lady, of course, weren't there. They are traveling in India. The Church of England consecrates its first female bishop today. After a long and divisive debate last year, church leaders voted to allow women to serve as bishops. Today's service was interrupted by one protester. Of course, the Catholic Church teaches that the ordination of women is not possible since Jesus chose only men as his disciples. The leader of a radical left-wing party was sworn in as Greece's new prime minister today. 40-year-old Alexis Tsipras is the youngest to hold the post in 150 years. He broke with tradition and took a secular oath instead of a Greek Orthodox oath. His party created a surprise alliance with a small right-wing nationalist party to secure this victory. The two parties, which are ideologically opposed, will form a coalition government. Russian President Vladimir Putin is again striking a defiant note. Apparently, he's upset with Western leaders threatening further sanctions for the escalating violence in Ukraine. He blames Ukraine's army for the turbulence. He calls it a foreign legion that doesn't share the same national interests as the Ukrainian people. 30 people were killed by rocket fire this weekend. That brings the total number of dead to 5,100 since April, when the hostilities began. Pope Francis has been following the escalating violence in the region.
Rinnovo un accorato appello perché si riprendano I tentativi di dialogo e si ponga fine ad ogni ostilità.
The Pope making a heartfelt appeal in the Angelus address yesterday for dialogue and an end to the hostilities there. Pope Francis underlines the important role of women in the faith. Reflecting on today's readings during his homily, the Holy Father says faith is transmitted through beautiful work of mothers and grandmothers. He continued saying, faith comes to us through women, as Jesus came to us through Mary. Pope Francis also reminds us faith is not negotiable, depending on opportunities that come into life. And the Vatican released balloons instead of doves at this Sunday's Angelus in St. Peter's Square on Sunday. The Pope said the balloons symbolize peace. He also made a request that he often makes.
Per favore, non dimenticatevi di pregare per me.
The Pope asking the crowd to remember to continue to pray for him. Coming up, Catholic Charities asking lawyers to volunteer to represent illegal immigrants. And 70 years after the liberation of Auschwitz, survivors visit the Nazi death camp. On this 26th of January, we celebrate the memorials of St. Timothy and Titus, bishops and disciples of St. Paul the Apostle. St. Timothy took a stand against the worship of idols and was martyred. Titus is credited for overturning paganism. He died peacefully at an old age. Thanks for joining us on this Monday evening. I'm Brian Patrick with our EWTN News Nightly team. Well, Oklahoma puts 3 executions on hold while the U.S. Supreme Court reviews a sedative used in execution protocol. The High Court is reviewing the use of a sedative to see if it defines cruel and unusual punishment. 4 inmates sued the state of Oklahoma, claiming the drug is ineffective. It was used for the first time last year in a botched execution that lasted 43 minutes. Oklahoma is seeking the right to resume executions if it finds a different suitable drug. Thousands of young people who fled Central America last summer are in legal limbo. Now, Catholic Charities here in Washington leads an effort to help them get their green cards. Wyatt Goolsby is here tonight with that story.
Brian, last year's surge in Central Americans coming to the U.S. is still keeping nonprofits like Catholic Charities busy. They're looking for lawyers willing to take on their cases. U.S. Customs and Border agents have had their hands full this last year. More Central Americans were caught crossing into the U.S. illegally than Mexicans. For those lucky enough to make it over the border, navigating the legal system is the next challenge. That's why Catholic Charities here in Maryland is training lawyers who have agreed to take up the pro bono immigration cases.
These children are essentially, have fled violence and persecution in their country, or they've experienced gang-based violence. They've suffered rape, physical assault, threats.
Jackie Rishti with Catholic Charities says getting minors legal representation is a moral issue. More than 1,200 unaccompanied minors live in Maryland and don't have the money to pay for a lawyer. Christina Wilkes says for many lawyers like herself, volunteering is rewarding.
The right to permanently live in the United States, go to school, get an education, work, really be able to rebuild a life that was typically shattered by trauma is a great experience, a great opportunity.
And she says it's that opportunity that keeps her motivated in training lawyers to help the families who really need it.
I also feel that this helps me help more children. I could take one case, or I could train, and mentor 30 people to take 30 cases. And so this is an area that I'm super comfortable with, and so it enables me to be able to, I think, help more people.
One of the questions that has been asked is how President Obama's executive order will affect these immigration cases. That order will not help any recent immigrants, but it may help parents or family members who have been in the U.S. for 5 years or longer. Brian.
All right, thank you, Wyatt Goolsby. And Pope Francis continues his outreach to other faiths. meeting a delegation today from Jerusalem's Hebrew University. You already got a preview of this, the Holy Father greeting the president of the university who gave Francis a Hebrew Bible.
Hebrew Bible. Thank you.
The Pope welcomed the group to the Vatican, personally greeting and shaking hands with each of the delegates. Auschwitz survivors make an emotional visit to the former Nazi death camp today. This comes before commemorations marking the 70th anniversary of its liberation. Susie Pinto has the story.
A small group of Holocaust survivors returned to the infamous Nazi concentration camp at Auschwitz, a day before ceremonies to mark 70 years since the camp's liberation.
I don't believe it that I'm here. I can't believe it. I'm strong enough. I cannot tell you. Feel bad. Is it enough? After 70 years.
Over 1 million Jews died at this camp in Poland. Its name has become synonymous with the Nazi genocide as it reflected the meticulous German effort to exterminate Europe's Jews, a plan dubbed the final solution.
It's very good that people who survived the camp still come here. We have to think about those who liberated the camp from the fascists, and that was the Red Army. They put their life on the line to free us. They lost their lives, and we should honor them.
Thomas Radel was just 13 when he was taken to Auschwitz. He wrote a book about his experiences and recalls a tremendous will to survive.
Everyone wanted to survive, and those who did asked themselves, what do we do now?
With the number of concentration camp survivors dwindling, Radel warns people not to forget the lessons of the Holocaust.
A catastrophe such as the Holocaust can happen again. It might be somewhere else. It may not concern Jews. It might be some different type of Holocaust. But when you have people who are unsatisfied, frustrated, who have very little and have no goal, and someone comes along and provides them with a goal, any sort of goal, they can unite in hatred.
Survivors making sure the world never forgets the horrors of the Holocaust. Susie Pinto, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, Vespers in the Basilica of St. Paul mark the end of a week dedicated to promoting Christian unity. And Jason Calvi has a profile of a simple priest known as Father Al, who is a step closer to sainthood. Practicing charity is the best way to evangelize. That's today's tweet from Pope Francis. Thanks for joining us on this Monday evening, the 26th of January. I'm Brian Patrick. The threatened bad weather delays a vote on human trafficking legislation in the House here in Washington today. The House is expected to take up 6 related bills tomorrow morning. H.R. 514 would prioritize the fight against human trafficking within the Department of State. That bill comes from New Jersey Congressman Chris Smith. He's also sponsoring H.R. 515 called Megan's Law to prevent demand for child sex trafficking. 4 similar bills are also on the table. Dawn Hawkins is Executive Director of the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. Your group's annual Dirty Dozen list of companies with sexually exploitative policies includes Backpage. It's kind of like a Craigslist, but I'm shocked to find that it sells women.
It is. Backpage is the #1 place to buy and sell women and children right now in the United States. They garner 80% of the online prostitution revenue in the United States, and very little is being done to stop them.
And the Super Bowl is coming up, and I know that's a big opportunity for this kind of trafficking. How can this go on so publicly?
Well, the problem is, 6 bills tomorrow on the trafficking issue. We're not solving the problem right now of human trafficking because we're ignoring one of the biggest causes of that. What's driving demand, and pornography is largely driving demand. Pornography is used to buy and sell as advertising on Backpage, and it's also showing that women are objects and that sex can be bought and sold.
Also, I know that Google has now created some policies against sexually explicit material, largely as a result of what you did. How would you do that?
We listed Google on the Dirty Dozen list for the last 2 years, and as a result, they removed all sexually explicit apps from Google Play, and they also stopped all advertising that is sexually explicit or links to explicit websites. So we see a complete change in Google. We expect that from other targets as well, like Verizon or Hilton Hotels, who are also profiting from pornography and sexual exploitation.
I'm a Verizon customer, and I got to say I was shocked to see Verizon on this list. How is Verizon profiting from child porn?
they're pushing child-themed pornography into the home of everybody who has their FiOS network. Last year, we found dozens of titles that were child-themed, rape-themed, or very violent, and they defended that even as a benefit to consumer choice.
What can we do about this?
We can contact these companies, demand policy changes. We can ask that our federal obscenity laws be enforced by the Department of Justice. There's a new Attorney General that we expect this week is her confirmation hearings. We can look and demand that our government leaders start to do something about this.
Should I pull my business from Verizon?
The thing with Verizon is that Comcast is doing it, and so are all of the others. So we can go to them and demand that we want them to be more responsible and to stop profiting from sexual exploitation.
Do you think we'll see any progress in this area this year?
I'm very hopeful. We've already seen some progress from a couple of companies that we've already listed. We've heard internally from them, and we've already seen a change with Verizon as they've started to change the type of films that they offer. They still have very violent and kind of teenage themed, but a lot of the very young themes are gone. So
I'm glad there's some progress being made. From the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, Dawn Hawkins, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Well, a priest from our nation's capital is a step closer to statehood. Jason Calvi introduces us to the family of Monsignor Aloysius Schwartz, known for his work with the poor.
It makes me feel good that I work for a future saint.
Bill Vita fundraised for his brother-in-law, Monsignor Aloysius Schwartz. Pope Francis named him venerable on Thursday, declaring he lived a life of heroic virtue.
He wore the same pair of shoes for over 20 years.
The simple priest also lived 5 years in this Korean shack. When he came back to the U.S., he'd avoid hotels, instead sleeping in an office. Testimonies from people that knew him convinced the Pope of his virtue.
We all need a hero and a champion, and Father Al's a champion.
Father Al, as he's known, served the poor in Korea and the Philippines, started boarding schools for children in those countries, and founded 2 religious congregations.
You see 1,000 children running around happy and occupied. You feel like you're found the touch of heaven right here on earth.
Father Al continued serving those kids, even after the once avid runner got ALS. He called it a blessing.
But he thinks he could be more closely connected to Christ and his suffering.
He died from the disease in 1992. Reggie Zamora, now a teacher in Maryland, benefited from Father Al's work, even though they never met.
Indeed, it changed my life because it provided me the opportunity to be better and become the person that I am right now and the person that I will be in the future as well.
And to learn more about the man twice nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, check out Father, that's spelled out FatherAlSainthood.org. Brian, he's now one miracle away from beatification. Then after that, another miracle before sainthood.
Unlikely to be the patron of ALS patients.
His initials ALS, Al Schwartz.
Father Al Schwartz. Thank you, Jason. The Pope finishes this week of prayer for Christian unity, praying Vespers. This traditional evening service held at St. Paul outside the wall, one of Rome's 4 basilicas. The Pope recalled martyrs from all Christian churches. He says unity between Christians is an important precursor to effective evangelizing. The Holy Father also greeted ecumenical leaders attending the service. Well, until tomorrow, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, watch again if you'd like on EWTN's YouTube page. For our EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick, and we leave you with one more look at Sunday's Vespers at St. Paul outside the walls. Good night and God bless you.